I'm going to do a long distance dedication right now to Elizabeth Wingate in Edmonds, Washington. Elizabeth wrote to me, "Steve, I belong to a large group of artists and share your info with them. All your efforts are so appreciated. Yes, we have a nice WordPress meetup in Seattle, but the New York City one is unique. I'm toying with the idea of setting up a WordPress meetup, blah, 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 blah. The SEO videos are a big help." That was Jonathan, one of Jonathan's. So anyway, Elizabeth, this presentation's for you. Allan Cole.
All right, how's it going, everybody? My name is Allan Cole, as you can see here, and today we're going to talk about why I stopped using child themes. But before I get into that, a little background about me. I live in Brooklyn. I run a company called Featherweight, where I do essentially just WordPress theme design and development. The company is only a couple of years old, but I've been doing WordPress stuff for about 6 years. Occasionally I do graphic and identity design, a little bit of music, and if anybody plays tennis, I'm always looking for somebody to play with, so feel free to get in touch with me afterwards. So yeah, to jump into what we're going to be talking about, there's three kind of general topics that we're going to get into. First, what are child themes and parent themes, and how are they useful? And then later on, I'll get into framework themes, why I stopped using them, and then introduce starter themes, which is what I've been using for about the last year, and explain some of the pros and cons and advantages to using all three. I'm assuming most of people here have either played with WordPress a little bit or at least installed a theme, hopefully. With anybody or anyone first getting into WordPress and you first get your theme installed, first thing you want to do is change it a little bit. You always want to tweak it, kind of customize it to make it suit your needs and your identity a little bit more than probably what it does outside of the, or out of the box rather. Especially when you're getting a theme from a theme directory or from a store, the first thing you want to do is change it because you know that there's going to be other people who have that exact same theme, and so you want to make sure that it's unique to you. So the first thing you have to do is customize it. And what's the easiest way to do that? Child themes. I did a talk, I think it was in 2010 or maybe late 2009, where I talked about why using child themes was really or how it really sped up my development process. And for a while, it became really vital to all the different projects and stuff that I've been working on. But to go into it and explain child themes a little bit more, WordPress defines it as a WordPress child theme is a theme that inherits the functionality of another theme called the parent theme and allows you to modify or add to the functionality of that parent theme. With a child theme, the parent theme is pretty much overridden. So you have a separate theme that you are developing that's separate from the parent-child theme, and to kind of give you a visual to kind of describe how that works, you have a parent theme, which is the theme that you probably have downloaded from that theme shop or from the themes repository on WordPress. And what you want to do is set up a child theme, which borrows some of the styles and the colors and the features from that parent theme, and kind of do your own spin-off of that parent theme. And so, as you can see here, like this first child theme borrows the gray and the green, but it leaves out the black. This one borrows the black and the gray, and the gray is on the outside, and inverses the black into the inside. And so it's kind of borrows certain features that you want to keep, and gets rid of it gets rid of certain features that you don't want to keep. And so it allows you to kind of focus in on just the customizations that you're making. You're not really worried about the overall structure of the theme. That's already done for you. You're just kind of honing in on those changes that you want to make, whether that's like a logo or a color change, a font change, or something like that. And so what's a parent theme? Pretty much any theme is a parent theme. And typically it's a standalone theme that just works out of the box. You can take any theme that you find in the repository, or anything that you buy or find online, and set up a child theme to work off of it. When a parent theme is specially made for building child themes, it's called a framework theme. Some examples are thematic, Genesis, hybrid, which you can see some of how they look here. An interesting thing with frameworks is kind of what kind of made me want to really jump in and use this as a development process for for clients and personal projects. The framework system just really kind of speeds up your development process by making a lot of typical functions and features and styles that you use on various layouts that you're working on. It just has all that kind of packed in there. And so when you're going to develop your child theme off of that, you have just like a really solid code base to build off of. And so it was really useful for a while for me as a developer. And so yeah, we'll get into some more things about the frameworks. Again, oops, like I said, lost a little bit. Okay, yeah, so yeah, definitely speeds up development time. Like I was just saying, it typically has, provides different layouts, functions, and features that you use over and over again through a lot of different types of sites, especially for the types of sites that I typically tend to, or at least at the time where the type of sites that I was working on at that time. It decreases the overall amount of code and files in your theme. When you think about the child theme itself, it's really a fairly small thing. It's really maybe at the most 2 or 3 files that you have to have in that folder. And so when you're working on it, there's a lot less to consider for the most part. And that doesn't necessarily hold true, and I'll get into that a little bit later on, why that doesn't really work out. But in the gist of it, as far as, if you're a new person to WordPress or to child themes, you don't have as much code to dig around and figure out and to break, really. You just kind of have your child theme set up, and you can build off of that, of pretty much just what's already there. It's another thing that it does is it makes it easy to make non-destructive customizations. And so you can go in and make changes to the theme. Like, let's say you have a layout and you want your header to be on the bottom or something. With a child theme, you can move that header down there without actually changing the parent theme. And then that comes into to play when you're making updates, where that theme, as far as the parent theme is concerned, it's still unchanged. The child theme that you have is where all the customizations exist. So when you go to update this parent theme, so that it's tied into all the latest and greatest of WordPress, then you don't lose those customizations that you made. They'll stay there and untouched by the theme update. So you get the latest code while you still have your changes there. So to jump in, these are a few themes that I made during that period when I was really all about this framework idea. This first one is this AutoFocus theme, which for a while was built on thematic. Actually, all 3 of these are built on the thematic framework. This middle site here is actually a hip-hop music blog that actually the guy from, I don't know if you guys watch Jimmy Fallon, but the drummer, the Roots, the drummer for the Roots pretty much runs this site. And so that was a pretty cool one to work on. Yeah, it's all, a child theme based off of thematic. And so is this last one of Peter Tosh, who was a bass player for Bob Marley. That site is another one that was built off of thematic. And you can kind of see like the wide range of things you can do with with building off of this framework that I had gotten really attached to at the time. But yeah, like I said, I'd been doing it for about 2 years. I was working pretty much solely with thematic and then just building child themes off of it. And it definitely made things fast in the beginning, but after a while, it started to cause a few issues. And one of the main ones was that it actually, as fast as it speeds up development, it was actually really tough to learn. There's a lot of functions and hooks, actions, and a lot of different coding conventions that you have to pretty much learn separately from WordPress. So like if you're new to WordPress and you go to use one of these frameworks, there's like a whole other code base that you have to figure out how it works and how it can work to your advantage. And I just found that when it came to making changes or going back on projects that I finished for updates and stuff like that, and making smaller adjustments and figuring out where to make those changes just became difficult after a while. I'll show you a crazy example. So this is like maybe a third of the content extensions file, which comes with Thematic. And I think there's like maybe 1,008 lines of code that are in there. And it's pretty much kind of the meat and potatoes of Thematic and why it's great, because it has, all the actions are listed in there, all of the hooks are there, so you can see everything that's there, all of the different things that are there. But when it comes time to find out, or to find which one you need to change to make one little small change, it's a lot of stuff to dig through. And it's just really, I found to be problematic because, obviously there's documentation on all of this that makes it a little bit easier, so you don't necessarily have to dig directly through the code. But for me, a large part of just getting familiar with WordPress and learning how it works is being able to reverse engineer some of this stuff. Being able to look at a function and figuring out that, okay, that's related to this particular file, or this function is related to that particular file. With this setup, it's very difficult to do because most of the functions that are there are referencing other functions and other functions there, and then it takes a while to really get down to, all right, I just need to remove this one person's name from this particular part of the theme display. And so it over time just got really difficult, and I just felt like I was learning the framework or having difficulties learning the framework where I didn't have difficulties learning WordPress. And because of that, this one of the difficulties that I found actually. Another one is dependencies, which is to describe that is pretty much just like a situation where you have your theme that you're working on, and everything that that's outside of it, or really your site actually is really the meat and potatoes, I guess, of everything. And so you have various things that are required for that site to work. And I found like I guess an example of that is so you have your main theme. You'll have a few plugins. Those can be dependencies. If it's vital to your site, and one of those, if an update comes up, or even if a plugin doesn't get updated often enough, it could become a problem because your theme is still moving, WordPress is still being updated, but this one plugin may hold you back, and it sort of forces you to have to either always be relying on it or to have to figure out another way to to develop your site. And so you always want to kind of keep the number of dependencies as low as possible. And obviously with this framework also being another dependency, it created issues. And one specifically for me was with this AutoFocus theme, where I was using Thematic, which this is how it looks out of the box. And I managed to change it enough to make it look like that. And there's a ton of features in there, like a lot of different layouts and features geared. It's actually a theme for photographers, so there was like a ton of custom options and features built into it that were specific for photographers. And so when it came to making that work for Thematic, it was actually pretty easy on my end. It was a fairly quick development because of the speed that the framework allowed. But there was an instance where there was an update to Thematic that I for the most part, I've been keeping up with the updates and making sure that this theme stayed up with with the updates to Thematic. But there was one instance maybe a year or two ago where they released an update and there was like a naming convention or something that changed, and there was like maybe 3 or 4 features that just straight broke. And so you had this is actually a theme I should mention too that I've been distributing. Actually, it's actually for sale. And so there were people who had bought it and were complaining, and you can imagine the support forum just kind of blowing up when they opened up their site and nothing was working, or these certain parts weren't working. And so it was kind of a issue where I was like, man, this theme is extremely dependent on this. If something goes wrong with this, that goes bad. And that was just especially when it comes to selling products, I just couldn't really move and operate the way that I wanted to with this kind of sort of in the way, even though it helped out a lot in certain ways. It was kind of creating a problem for me. And then so you also have another thing to consider is the idea of a grandchild theme, which is pretty much impossible at this point. Like with WordPress, it just isn't possible for you to reference the templates in the child theme, which doesn't have any, and then have that reference the parent's themes template files. It's just not a situation that works, but it seems like something that you should be able to do, especially if you're, like there's even, a theme marketplace for just child themes. And so let's say you're a new user, you don't really know a whole bunch, but the theme that you want and you like the most is a child theme. You want to change it, you kind of just have to edit it directly. You can't do a grandchild theme of that because it doesn't work. And the last thing was performance issues, which is kind of an arguable thing, I guess. We can maybe debate about that later. But it's some of the things that come into play when you have two theme folders is that WordPress will have to check, it knows that your child theme is the one that's activated. It has to check for that folder. When it doesn't find the thing that it's looking for in there, and it has to also check the parent folder. And so that's just a little bit of extra work that WordPress has to do, just on top of what it would normally have to do if it was just a plain theme running by itself. There's also the issue of style sheets, and particularly with thematic. I don't know if some of the other frameworks work the same way, but with thematic, it comes with a series of maybe about 4 or 5 different styles. That some are for typography, others are for layout. Another one might be for color or like a reset style sheet. And all of those style sheets are brought in using @import. And I don't know if you guys are all familiar with that, but essentially when you'll have a style sheet and a listing of other styles that are going to have to be imported into that. And when that happens, it's just a little bit of extra work that the browser and the server has to do to handle that. There's ways of compressing all of that and making it a little bit faster, but just out of the box and now the general way that at least the thematic framework at the time was working, it opened things up to having that performance issue where you'd be bringing in a ton of extra style sheets, which may or may not be necessary. And so that more or less brought me to starter themes. Like after a while, once I started to really get stuck with thematic, I found myself rather than using child themes, just initially just editing thematic directly, which worked for a while. But then just kind of being subscribed to some of the WordPress feeds that are out there, I heard about this new idea called starter themes, and decided to check a couple of them out and see how they work. And to explain how what a starter theme is, it's essentially a base theme that you fork or copy to be your own theme, right? And so it kind of eliminates the idea of making changes to to a theme by creating a child theme. That's not there anymore. Any change you want to make, you just make directly to the theme. And the thing that really made this kind of hit home for me was when I first started using WordPress back in like 06 or 05 or something like that. It came with this theme called Kubrick, which was the old original default theme that used to come with WordPress. And back then, this is before I think even child themes could be done then, but people weren't using them. But for the most part, you would just go into Kubrick, see how it works, and either take the code, take the bits and pieces that you liked and use it for your own, or just edit Kubrick directly and change that, and make it into your own thing. And that's really how I kind of first fell in love with WordPress, was doing things that way. And it just kind of made just the learning process that much more fun for me, at least. Like you really have to kind of go in there, edit the code, break things a little bit, and just kind of see what happens. And it's you end up learning so much that way. Whereas with the child theme, you're kind of stuck with only learning how the framework works for the most part. You still aren't really familiarizing yourself with the WordPress template tags that are out there. And so I'll show you what a typical starter theme looks very, very basic. They usually do come with styles so that you can at least have like a standard display. But I personally like to start here. Like I mentioned earlier, I'm a front-end designer and developer, and so starting here, especially now, helps out a lot because I can go in and instead of having to look for the things that I want to take out or keep, I'm only adding the things that I want, and there's nothing that I want to take out because it's just so bare minimum. And so especially in client projects and other themes and stuff that I'm working on, it makes things easier to just start out here. Let me see. In comparison to frameworks, starter themes, they do have hooks and actions and filters. They generally have a lot less of them. Just because like again, it's more of a bare bones kind of, this is just the bare essentials that you need to get started with a WordPress theme. And so it doesn't necessarily need as many hooks and filters and functions and stuff for that purpose. It also comes with a ton of just best practice features where, like the one that I actually use is written in HTML5, so that's like a hurdle that I don't have to think about. Like the markup is already really clean and done in an accessible way. And so it just makes where you start out at just a much better place to be. And it also comes with, well, some of them come with other features like less CSS files, which you can use to speed up your CSS development. A lot of them have them already written into the themes, and it just makes it a little bit easier to go in and kind of think a little bit more holistically when you're developing your theme. Yeah, so this is kind of what I was saying earlier, where the starter theme, because you have to get in and really kind of look at the code and not be afraid of it, or learn to not be afraid of it, you learn so much more. And I found that the general structure of them all, and the way that you can more or less just go in and find the thing that you're looking for and change it outright. I just find that to be a much simpler way to approach learning WordPress, learning how to develop themes for WordPress. And so, yeah, I've been a big advocate for them as of late. And then another thing that you get out of it is over time, you begin to develop your own starter theme, like the one that I use, which is actually called Underscores. It comes with its own, kind of best practices and features and stuff that you can use. But, now that I've been using them for quite a while now, I've begun to introduce my own features and like functions and things that I use repeatedly on other sites. And so it kind of over time becomes your own starter theme, like that's personal to you, based off of what you know and what you've learned by playing around with it. Here's some examples of some of the starter themes that are out there. This Stalkers one is really popular. I use Underscores theme pretty much for everything now. And it has this really cool feature that's built in that it essentially lets you, like the whole point of this Underscores theme is that you start it out as your own theme. You have their code base, but it's actually your theme. So when you download it, rather than just downloading a bunch of files and having to search and replace all of the theme name references, you can just put your theme name into this folder. I mean, not this folder, this format at the top, and it'll output a new theme with your naming convention already built into all of the code. And so you automatically start out with your own theme that's just for you, which is just super. That had me sold from day one when I saw that. So yeah, having to dig through all of those files is kind of can be a mess sometimes. And this one over here, the Bones theme is really cool too. It has this the less CSS features and Sass, which is another like CSS. I don't even know what you call that actually. It's just another way to kind of develop CSS in a faster, more efficient way. And it's also written in HTML5. Actually, I think all three of these are written in HTML5. And it just, like I mentioned before, it just gives you a really good starting point for when you're developing a WordPress theme. And so, yeah, all in all, for me, it actually depends on where you're coming from, how much you know, and what you're most comfortable with. For me, using the parent-child theme relationship is actually not a bad idea sometimes. In some cases, when, like I mentioned before, if you're downloading a theme from the repository and you just want to change maybe the colors and the changes, or maybe like a font or something, and those changes aren't available as theme options already, then a child theme, you can just, whip one up really quickly and make those changes really quickly, and it doesn't really do too much. I wouldn't recommend it for doing, larger scale projects, like kind of what I've been doing, for some of my clients now. Yeah, so it's still good, and it still has a use, depending on where you're coming from. For me, the framework idea, I just don't think it will last too much longer, because of that disconnect, where you have to, you spend so much time learning that framework, where you almost forget to learn WordPress, which is what brought you here in the first place. And because of all of like the downsides of the dependencies and things that I mentioned earlier, it just doesn't. I don't think for me personally it'll stick around for much longer in my development process. Starter themes have definitely kind of taken that over, like I mentioned before, it's just kind of it just makes things that much more simple. You're not worried about all right, which function do I need to find to change this and to change that as much. You can more or less just kind of crack open the code, like what I did when I first discovered WordPress 5 or 6 years ago. And I should also mention that I'm not a coder, or like by nature I'm an artist. Like I mentioned before, I do a little bit of music stuff, and so all this I just kind of picked up over time. But I found that just digging in there, breaking stuff is definitely the best way to learn. And as far as starter themes are concerned, I'm actually working on my own, and hopefully, or actually the one that I've been using for myself, I'm actually going to be distributing on a new site that I'm probably going to launch at the beginning of next year. It's essentially just going to be a theme shop, a very small boutique style. I'm no longer going to be doing design or development services, and going to try to focus on doing this theme sales thing full on. And so, if you're interested in any of the stuff you see here, feel free to check it out. There's nothing on the site yet, but in January it'll be up and coming. So yeah, be sure to check back around then. And yeah, that's pretty much it. If there's any questions, I'm sure there's a lot. Yep.
Yeah, so one of the advantages of having a parent-child theme is that, as WordPress updates, the parent theme gets updated. You don't have to worry about it. You don't worry about the child theme. So how does it work with the starter theme?
With the starter theme, like that's there. You are going to have to update your own theme. You won't necessarily need to, because it's your theme, there won't be any other updates. You'll have to update it. And so, like, if there's an issue or some of the code that, obviously becomes deprecated over time, that's unuseful, all you have to do is turn on that, what is that option in the, what's that? Yes, WP debug in the config file, and it'll show you all of the functions that you're running in your theme that you need to update. It tells you what function you need to change it to, and you can kind of do it right there. Again, you still have to get into the code, but I just think people should just do it now at this point. It's not worth being scared of anymore, if you ask me.
It also means that if you have a client and you loaded the theme,
yeah.
you have to,
yeah, that's there.
If the client comes back and there's a problem, you have to work on it and
yeah,
work on your theme.
that's definitely there. That's definitely there. But I just found that in those client projects, like luckily none of them have crashed yet. But we'll see how it works out. But yeah, it's at least with the thematic theme so far, like they've been able to update, and nothing is, like most of those, at least the two towards this side were a lot, were very small as far as the amount of modifications that I was making. Most of it was just style sheets and very few like actual templates being changed. So as thematics being updated, they can just kind of keep it going, and it won't really interfere too much.
This point is more of actually knowing everything that your team has, compared to using someone else's work, and to get used to how they code, how they design, so on and so forth.
Yeah, let's go, man. Yeah.
Do you sort of curate different types of starter themes for different types of websites?
Can you say that again?
Do you like curate your own starter themes for different types of projects for yourself, or you just always start with like plain?
No, I actually sometimes, like I mentioned before, this one that I'll probably be setting up on this this new site that I'm working on. That one, all it does is just have a lot of features that I use frequently. Like for me, I always need to have a grid. I like everything that I'm doing to line up and really stick to a solid grid. And so there's a jQuery plugin that I use to overset or overlay on top of the layout, and I use that for every development that I do. And so that's something that I'm going to include into it. And it's more or less about you know, I'm also designing these themes too. So I know what things need to, or how they're going to look already. And so it's more about just kind of starting from a place where I can just go through and have all of that stuff at hand and not have to do a lot to, you know, get get out of the theme what I want. It mostly comes down to just being about the styling and the general structure of things for the most part.
Yep. Have you tried working from like 2011 or 2012?
I have. That's actually think how I got to underscores is when, because it's funny that I think they're all like from thematic to underscores, and then I think 2010 are all not Ian Shaper. Ian Stewart, yes, who used to run Theme Shaper. And so yeah, I started initially with that 2010 theme and tweaked it a little bit. And for a while, I think I maybe did about 2 or 3 sites just built off of that and just tweaking that one directly. But then, yeah, once I saw underscores, it just kind of took over everything. Yep. Oh.
Once you moved away from framework themes, did you find yourself missing any of that functionality that it brought in, where now you have to go use plugins or some other way of getting that same functionality?
Not at all. Not at all. No, like I guess you know, and like I mentioned before, it kind of all comes down to, you know, where you're coming from and what you're trying to do. And I kind of, you know, felt myself being a little bit more limited with the frameworks because, you know, like there may be a feature that, you know, a client may be wanting or something new that hasn't really been done yet. And I'm going to have to build it on top of something anyway. You know, that's going to have to come from me. It's not going to be able to come from the framework. The framework is more or less built around, you know, helping you do common things easily or helping you to inject code in various places easily. But sometimes you just need to, you know, at least for me in various projects, I just need to get in and just change it directly. And the starter themes made that a lot easier. Oh, yeah.
I have a question. I'm just learning WordPress right now. So I thought that if you use a parent theme, it's very good because when you're managing like I set up 2010 and I was building that and I wasn't using
modifying the HTML and CSS.
I didn't download, I import the parent from the CSS, my code is. So I noticed I was having problems with the functions.
The PHP functions?
The PHP functions. So I asked someone who was very knowledgeable with WordPress, and they said it's best not to use parents. It's best to use a starter theme like Bones or something like that, because it can cause problems with the functions. I was wondering if that was possible. Like the web theme based on 2010 that I did, is it possible for me to transfer that now from 2010 to another theme, now that I already set up in 2010, but just keep the database,
keeping the database intact, but then transfer over to another theme?
Yeah, I want the content the same and the code and everything, but is it possible?
Yeah, that's definitely doable. Yeah, you can, your content is separate from your theme. So you can always change any theme and it won't have any effect on your content in most situations. Going back to, I think I understood what you meant about the 2010 functions file and the child theme that you may have built from that. Well, if you're with that child theme, it's overriding that functions file in 2010, and so if there's something that's a little buggy in your functions file, the override could become problematic. I think that's what she was asking.
Yeah, and that's what I started noticing problems with. And then someone told me don't use parents, just start with that starter theme.
Yeah, I feel like in general you can just, you're less likely to break things, at least to me. Like if you go in like one of the simpler things that I've needed to do is like, let's say, you know, your general posts will have, you know, a title, and like under it you'll have like the author, the category, and tags or something. It's much easier to you know, to track down and find that particular piece of markup as opposed to finding a function that generates that markup in a framework that has, you know, tons of different folders and lots of different other files that aren't really specific to the theme. They're just kind of you know, there to kind of foster rapid development if you know it and understand it really, really well. So I just find it a little bit easier to just you know, just edit things directly.
But how do you notice the functions? Like, how do I figure out what kind of functions I need to add from the codex? Or do I use a plugin? Is that better functions? I've been reading some ways, the best ways to use plugins and how to add functions, but how do you know what to add?
It's tricky. Like sometimes you, especially if you're new, plugins make it a little easier because you can, you know, a lot of the typical things that you may want to do in the beginning, there's probably a plugin out there already that accomplishes it. But yeah, in some cases, it's tricky. Like a lot of it depends on what you're actually trying to do. If you have, if you know what you're trying to accomplish, I would suggest try to find a plugin that already does it. Then you don't have to think about the functions at all. The plugin will probably handle it, and you'll have options that you know, can help you to configure and make that plugin work, you know, more specifically to you. But yeah, you know, sometimes you'll want to get in there and mess with the functions, but even before you get in there, especially if you're new, I'll just say try to you know, rely on the plugins initially. Yeah. Oh, yep.
Yeah, I've built some child themes on Fnatic, and one of the things about this sort of approach is everything winds up being in your functions file, where you're essentially overriding all sorts of loops and stuff like that. And I'm just curious about your experience of switching from that. So with the starter themes, do you, like, instead of that, you know, there's some advantages to that kind of modular approach where it's all in your functions file. Do you just go back to sort of the old school, like I'm just going to edit page templates instead and build page templates rather than, because there's some thoughts about whether a lot of your stuff should reside in a single functions file where you're overriding loops, or should you just edit template pages?
Yeah, I mean, I think it depends on, again, like, you know, what the end goal is. Like in certain situations, you know, like for instance, what you just mentioned, like let's say, you know, like what I was just talking about with the meta tags that you might have with every post that's going to display, whether you're on the archive, it's going to be on the home page, it's going to be everywhere where there's a post displayed, those meta tags are going to be there. And so, yeah, it makes sense to have a function that generates that. So if you want to alter it, you can just go in and change the function, and then it automatically changes it everywhere. And the underscores theme in particularly does have that built in, where, like, at least for the metadata that's there, there's a function that just outputs that, and it's the same, you know, throughout all the templates. And so, yeah, for cases like that, it makes sense. And other situations where you want to, you know, add like a slider or something like that, not really sure it makes sense to go in and, you know, make a function and a hook to really, you know, install that into the theme, you know. That may not be the best example, but.
Just a quick follow-up question on that. I haven't used any starter themes like you're describing. Are the functions that you're describing like that, are they kept in functions PHP, or do they have their own like suite of functions that is pulled up?
Some of them they're all a little bit different. Underscores has a main functions file which has the general like theme setup stuff in there. And then there's also like an includes file that you can use if you want to have options. There's a file you can that's commented out in your main functions file that you can uncomment so that it activates, and it'll basically pull in the theme functions file and allow you to use the options that are there. If you don't want to have options in your theme, then you just comment it out so that you don't have those options. And so there's a folder, you know, and there's, you know, even some JavaScript stuff that works the same way, you know, and it's not even just for templates. So like even some of the styles work in a similar way, where if you want to include, you know, one of the style sheets, you can use either that import thing, or you can actually just, you know, copy and paste your styles into like the main style sheet that's there.
Do you think 2010 is obsolete? It's like a weird question. But
No.
when I saw you like at the WordCamp in 2010.
Oh, okay, okay.
And you were like 2010, I'm going for this.
Yeah.
So ever since then, I got used to it.
Yeah, yeah.
I've done like 30 child themes on 2010.
Yeah, yeah.
And you know, for sites that don't want to be responsive, it's
Yeah.
like my go-to.
Yeah, yeah.
But you know, obviously, it's like it's 3 years old. There's other stuff. You know, it's just a weird question.
Yeah, I mean, well, it's that was a little subjective, but yeah, for me, I've like Bo asked, yeah, I've used it. You know, when I first stopped using thematic, 2010 was what I tried out, and also 2011, just using those as just almost as starter themes where I just took them and kind of changed them into something else. Yeah, that was a little bit more subjective.
You think it's still a viable?
Oh yeah. I mean, it definitely it works really well. Yeah.
It's so well documented.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Again, like most of this, it applies to me. Like again, like I'm selling themes and kind of have to and also doing themes for clients and stuff. So I have to kind of approach things from a different perspective. If you're just doing like a personal site, you may want to try all 3 different ways and see which way works best for you. It's just whatever everyone's is most comfortable with at the end of the day. Anything else? Oh no. All right.
Question, I've been using starter themes since I started, and
okay.
The one I tend to use is the roots theme.
Okay. Yeah.
I'm just wondering if you're familiar with that and how I never used the other ones. Just want to know how it compares to. That one has also.
What's the name you said?
Roots. Yeah, it's I'm familiar with it. I haven't used it. When I did download it once, and I was just it kind of scared me how many files were there. And so that kind of threw me a little bit. I was like, it almost felt like a framework because there were just so many files initially. But I'm sure it's again, I haven't tried it, but I'm sure you could probably do the same thing that I'd be able to pull off with with Starkers or Underscores theme. It just when choosing a starter theme, it definitely you want to look and make sure that those features are relevant. Like with Underscores, it doesn't really come with. It has some responsive stuff in there, but nothing really that you can really get specific with. If I'm not mistaken, Roots does have some responsive stuff built in for iPhone, iPad, and everything. And so it's that's a feature that the one that I use doesn't have. And so if that's part of the goal of your project, then yeah, it makes sense to try that one out.
Actually, so I've used Roots on a couple projects. Now it has Twitter Bootstrap open, right? So it's pretty responsive. There's all this awesome stuff. I like Roots, but one of the things that I think it does too hard, I think it tries to change too much stuff. It changes the permalink structure, and it changes. It does a couple of things that I've actually found. Sometimes I've written some code or a function or I used a plugin that just conflicted with it. So yeah, I think it just tries to do too much in certain aspects. Overall, it's a very good theme. It's built in Bootstrap and it's been proven. But you just need to be careful about that kind of stuff.
Not counting, let's say, clean markup and CSS reset rules. What are you like the top 5 or something? Top things that you're looking for in a starter theme?
You said not counting
like really clean markup.
Okay.
And CSS reset rules.
Okay. I mean, well, the responsive stuff has been really cool. For me, I don't like to have a lot of files. To me, it makes things more confusing. Especially not, being, a developer by heart. I like to be able to look at it and know that, all right, this is called single.php. That's probably just going to show a single post. I like it to be, kind of laid out very simple. So that's, probably the number one thing that I look for. Just mention the responsive effects. I mean, it's I don't know, for me, I like to not have to start with a little and turn it into a lot. And so it helps me to understand a lot more what's going on. So when issues pop up, it's easy to backtrack and figure out where it came from. And so I try to actually, that's probably one of the features, is not having many features is one of the things that I'm looking for normally. So yeah. Did you have them? Yeah.
I wonder why people still use the theme 2010. Because it doesn't include responsive design. 2011 includes a responsive design, so that seems a better choice than the 2010.
Well, they're designed subtly differently. And if I'm not as familiar with 2011, but yeah, at least when I look at them both, they definitely function a little bit differently. You may know 2010 a little bit better, and so it may make staying with that theme and maybe installing a responsive plugin more ideal, so that you're familiar with what you're working with, as opposed to, maybe having to pick up 2011 and not knowing what you're doing with it out of the box. But yeah, there's probably a lot of different reasons you might want to stay with, using 2010 over 2011, even though it does have the responsive stuff. Oh, we got guy in the back.
So maybe it sense to use a starter theme or parent theme to build off that, just so they can update with that.
Can you repeat that?
So maybe it sense to use a starter theme and a parent theme so it can be updated.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. Like you can use a parent theme and like again a parent theme.
Just building off that, but using the parent theme.
Yeah, like there's actually a few. I want to say it might be the thesis, or maybe it's this Genesis. That's a framework where they sell. Is that what you mean, or?
I mean, a foundation, say, or even like HTML5 boilerplate.
Yeah.
Really, the simpler the better. So you're just building off that.
Yeah, well, I mean, you could do that. I would just imagine, like for something that's a little bit more robust, like HTML boilerplate theme. It may make sense to use a child theme, especially if you're mostly just going to be editing styles and some of the less intrusive aspects of that theme. Yeah, just use a child theme. That'll save you some time for sure.
And then also just you're safe if it updates.
Exactly.
You don't have to pull that work yourself.
Yeah, and that's actually going back to Bo's question. That's another thing too. Like the simpler it is going in, the less you'll have to worry about staying up with those updates. If it's written, with at least the standards at the time, then when that update pops up, with WordPress update, it won't have as much of an impact. And it would obviously be a little bit different in a more robust theme. There's a lot more going on, and so there's the potential for there to be more updates with that type of setup. Yeah.
I'm new to using the Genesis framework because of the whole problem of support.
Yeah, that's been a good one for them.
So plugins too. So even though I use very few amount of plugins, I did use Tim Thumb, and I had so many clients that was a nightmare. And at least Studio Press, you can get email help, and they started phone help recently. Do you know if there's any starter themes that you can pay for support?
Well, no, I don't know of any off the top. I won't say that they aren't out there, but I don't know of any off the top of my head. But I would also say that with the starter theme, you'll want to go in and kind of play around with it. Whereas with the Genesis theme, that's kind of the opposite of what you're trying to do there. It's already there for you, and you're just again pulling what you want and what you don't want, or pulling what you want and removing what you don't want. And so
it's true that functions file kills you. It's,
wait, say that again.
The functions, like trying to figure out what does what, it's very annoying.
Yeah,
I'm going to move to a startup theme when I learn more, but for right now, I need this report.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, just stick to what you know and what you're most comfortable with, but it can't hurt to pick up another way of doing it, especially if the end running.
It's really comparable to Genesis.
Yeah.
They have much better support. I've moved away from Genesis immediately.
Oh, yeah.
They didn't have any support.
Oh,
yeah. The thesis is great.
Okay, cool.
I was going to say earlier, to ask for her question, I was going to ask your experience getting experience with roots versus bones and versus those other starters.
No.
And I've been designing with roots, and I love the support. Like, there's a huge community around it, and then there's a community around her Bootstrap, and that's enormous. So really any question you have,
you can get it answered. Yeah.
I would suggest.
Yeah, I definitely, I'm not stopping at underscores. That's what I started with. But yeah, there's a lot of cool other ones that are out there, it seems. Yeah. Cool. I think that's about it. All right. Thanks, guys.